was past president of IFLA.
Not IFLA.
Australian Library Information Association. She has a good experience with library associations, and now we are preparing your lecture here today in the organization of National University Library, and also Association and Commission for Library Education and CPD. Dr. Hallam is a manager and also a professor at the University of Queensland, Australia, and she had a lot of experience with information and digital literacy. So we are very keen to have you today and hear all the experience of the Australian University Libraries dealing with this issue.
Thank you Diana, very much indeed. We are recording the presentation as well, so I'm going to be a little bit static, I think, in terms of what's required here. So, okay, just testing the microphone to make sure that's good. Oh, no, I need to switch it on. Digital literacy, number one. Okay. So thank you everybody for, certainly to Gianna and Laurel and the library here and the association for the opportunity to come and meet with you all and talk about some of the things that we're doing. The title of the presentation is Digital Disruption and the Need to Build a Successful Future Through Information and Digital Literacy. This is a presentation I've given in Australia. The University of Queensland looks after a lot of school libraries through teacher librarians. They provide a lot of services and support to school libraries. And this was a presentation given in July to the school library community and also to a number of academic librarians as well. So just a little bit of background, I suppose, before I start. I'm British originally. I was born in Britain. Lived in Africa for 10 years and then moved to Australia, so have moved around the world. My library career, I was originally a special librarian, so working in the corporate sector with major accounting, legal and consulting firms from that side. And then I moved from there into academia and did probably about 10 years as a normal, inverted commas, normal academic, running the Library and Information Science program at Queensland University of Technology. And then I was invited to lead an e-learning project, a national e-learning project in Australia. And so my career changed direction and I became much more involved with e-learning, with digital literacies and those sort of areas, and the role that libraries play specifically in bringing together learners and their content. So we'll start with a map. Has anybody been to Australia? Have we got nobody? Not yet. But you have relatives in Australia, perhaps. There are a lot of Croatian people in Australia. So hopefully one day. So I live in Brisbane, which is here on the map, so in Queensland. So it's a very large country, as you're probably aware. It's about 5,000 kilometres from east to west and about 3,500 from north to south. So for people to get together in our country is quite significantly a challenge. We did have one ALIA conference in Alice Springs, which was actually really clever because it was equidistant just about from everywhere, and it was a place that a lot of people had not been to. So it was a very, very successful conference. So I'm associated with two universities. This one is Queensland University of Technology, so this is my academic hat, where I'm professor. We have the Brisbane River, is the major river that goes through Brisbane. And the university campus is in a fantastic location on the edge of the city and lots of facilities. You can just see over there we have ferry boats that go along the river that connect all the different suburbs and things. So that's one university. The other university I'm involved with is also on the river, and that's the University of Queensland. And they are in fact connected by ferries. So it takes about 20 minutes by ferry between the two universities, which is a good way to go. But what I'd like to try and cover with you, so I'm associated with both those universities as QUT, University of Technology, as an academic, and then with University of Queensland as a practitioner. So I cover both sides of that. And I also do some consulting work, again, linking academic with practice. So what I want to look at today is what we mean by digital disruption and what this might actually mean to the future workforce. This is very much from an Australian perspective, of course. So there'll be some commonalities, I believe, in terms of what's happening in Europe, but the research that's being done is very much around the Australian side of things. And if there are going to be changes happening to the future workforce, what does this mean in terms of digital literacy, and where do librarians fit in to supporting their communities in developing the skills that are required for a successful career and a successful community? And specifically then I'll look at what we're doing at University of Queensland Library, where we've been working specifically on a strategic framework for information and digital literacy, and rolling that out through a number of initiatives across the teaching and learning side of things, as well as the research side of the university. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask along the way so that we can keep your understanding clear. And if I'm speaking too quickly, please let me know. I realise it's second language. So, digital disruption. Is it a concept in Croatian? Do you talk about digital disruption? Not quite that way. So do you see digital change and interaction as a positive or as a negative?
Demanding, perhaps.
Demanding? Yeah. So, okay. So, indeed, well, but hopefully some opportunities as well. So, just to come to basics, what do we understand as digital disruption? And normally, sort of, as you can see here, it refers to rapid transformational change. So technology is changing everything. So made possible by digital technologies, but also disruption is the impact that it has on business practices, and as you say, challenging, and in some cases even threatening to some business practices. In terms of the way that business has traditionally been done. So that's sort of the change that needs to happen. But I'd argue that this isn't anything new, like there's always been technological change. So the examples there, when the printing press came in, all those monks who used to do manuscripts lost their jobs. Okay, change happened at that point. When electricity came in, you still have gas lamp lighters here, but most places would not have that sort of role in society. So electricity has changed so much. The horseless carriage, so cars have taken over, and all of those carriages are obsolete, other than fiacres in different tourist cities, etc. And of course, flight. So when I first lived in Africa, everybody went to Africa by ship. And of course, those sort of journeys by sea are no longer. Now you go on cruises. So it's reinvented itself in different ways. So the two significant factors are the speed of change. All right, we've always had change, but the speed of change and the high stakes involved. The fact that the speed of change is changing things so dramatically. There's hardly time to catch your breath before the next change has come through. So change is exponential, it's continually growing, and it's accelerating. So it's like the universe, an expanding universe and getting wider and larger all of the time. And also the fact that things are happening on simultaneously on different fronts. It's not just one thing changing, multiple things are changing all at the same time. And many technologies are then converging. So arguably this then sort of produces new and unexpected opportunities. You won't be able to see that diagram. There is a link through from the presentation afterwards. But basically that's a graphic representation of what's been happening just over the last few years. And this box, the blue box, is actually an enlargement of the box up higher there. So the change factors, the driving factors, are computing power is becoming increasingly more powerful, naturally. Storage has changed, so we've gone from, even dare I say, this is a device here, is very large compared to things today. Everything is getting micro, nano, much, much, much smaller. And then bandwidth, the available sort of transmission of data is also becoming much, much easier. And the other side of it, the green points there, are sort of dynamic ecosystems. So things are changing very fast and becoming very dynamic. And then everything is becoming more open, and we were talking a little bit about open data, open repositories, e-journals being open. So the ability to exchange data, to link data together, is changing the way that we communicate the information we have. But in terms of looking at the impact, if you're looking at more at the business sector specifically, the marketplace is being challenged. And you might hear of this in many different situations. There are opportunities for startups, new segments sort of emerge. I have a nephew in Britain, and he works in a major car insurance company. And his role at the moment is just a future gaze to see what's going to happen with driverless cars. If we have driverless cars, you won't need car insurance because you won't own a car. The whole business models of insurance is changing, just as it is for car manufacturers as well. So there can be substantially huge changes coming into play from those areas. So technology is really transforming the way businesses are run, so how business people do their business, but also then how they interact with customers. The customer, through the digital open media, there are many new ways to communicate with your customers. So if you put this in your library hat on as well, it impacts on libraries as well. The way you do your business, the way you interact with your customers is going to be changing constantly as well. And so it is the fact that you've got mobile, social, and cloud technologies are making so much difference in terms of what's going on. So at the collective level, very often it seems to be a positive side. Change is positive for society. But at the individual level, your own business changing, that can seem very challenging and a negative at the same time. So that's just a screen grab of a number of different disruptive technologies, arguably. So Uber. So the taxi drivers around the world have been very upset with Uber, of course. But they don't own any taxis, all right? So it's a company that has no inventory, so to speak. Airbnb, okay, it's a big business, but it doesn't own any property. And so it goes on for the other ones. So Skype and those type of tools, there's no infrastructure around it. So they're very much a service layer that is enabled by technology without needing the capital investment in a lot of those things. So in terms of conceptualizing disruption, the word disruption in English really improves that it's problematic. It is a negative sort of connotation that underpins it. But also, you're only disrupting in a temporary way. All right? It's a disruption, but then we go back to the old thing and we keep moving on. And disruption can also mean that it's fairly minor, so just a tremor rather than a major earthquake. And so that can be, I suppose, not concerning, but complex as a concept. In reality, it's not temporary. Okay, the digital disruption, the technological change that is happening, even with Brexit, who think they're going to return to the 1950s, it's not going to happen. The world has changed and is going to continue to change, and there will be no going back. And then the old ways of doing things have been superseded, have been overtaken. In terms of it being minor, arguably, it is a paradigm shift. Things are changing in a major, major way, and that the balance of power has therefore changed. So, in Australia, and again, going back to the map, the challenge of distance in Australia is immense. And so the digital capabilities of communicating across the country are really huge opportunities. if you take remote or regional communities, they suddenly, through e-health, have the opportunity to work, you know, if you're a patient with a certain problem, you can actually work with doctors thousands of kilometers away. They can diagnose, they can investigate your body, they can do everything technologically, which was never the situation before. So Australia has always been what we term a fast adopter of technology. There's huge advantages for our country to move in that direction. So it's certainly not minor or temporary, and most communities are trying to look for opportunities rather than see. So the glass is half full rather than being half empty. Arguably then you can have certainly better efficiencies, better access to customers, improved communication, opening up new markets, etc., etc. In terms of communication, this morning before coming here I had to run some interviews with candidates for jobs at the University of Queensland. So I was in Zagreb and we did it online, and so to actually do that. When I first went to Africa and wanted to write to my parents, a letter would take 13 weeks and would go by sea. There wasn't no AML services and things like that. So just that incidence of how communication has changed so dramatically. And we're not going to go back, I'm quite sure. So how does this then impact on the workforce in the business sector, but also in the cultural sectors, etc.? So a recent survey of businesses in Australia indicated that 82% expected their organisations to be a digital business within 3 years. So most of their work would be happening online rather than the lovely little shops that you have here in Zagreb. Very, very different. The expectation is that it will be an online business. And so, therefore, it means that all the people working in those businesses need to have the skill sets to be able to contribute to the success of the organisation. Okay, so they can't remain without those digital skills. So in terms of the impact on universities, employers are saying very loudly that the universities have a responsibility to develop whatever discipline you're in, very highly digitally literate graduates who are going to be able to work in this new business sector. Not only so that they can function on day one, they don't have to be trained in this business, but they're going to be the leaders of change to bring existing workers with them into this new environment. And so there have been, in fact, a number of studies looking at this in detail. And I'll just very quickly look at some of those. It's across the different areas. The Business Council of Australia, obviously, that's business leaders in the country, looking specifically at what's happening in their sector. Leading academics belong to a Council of Learning Academics, and they've been looking at the implications for their roles as teachers. CSIRO is a major research institution, a national government institution, and then Regional Australia Institute obviously is worried or concerned about things that are happening not in the capital cities of Australia, but in the regional areas. And they've worked with NBN, and that's the rollout of a digital network across the country. So just like electrification happening, the digital channels of communication are also important. Lots of politics and lots of wasted money and all of those things that goes with government, but nothing can succeed without the NBN actually coming into play. So it's the National Broadband Network. So the Business Council, they've looked and done research into what employers want. And they've said very loud and clearly that they need technical skills, the understanding of information and communication technologies, they need skills in data analysis and in critical analysis. So it's not just the functional, can you use this piece of hardware? It's the understanding of this whole digital environment and the thought processes that are needed within that. On the other hand, the ACOLA, they've looked at the skills and capabilities for innovation. Okay, so the digital, if there are opportunities to become innovative, what are the skills that you're going to need to become that innovative. So there's been a national project here to look at the things, and a multidisciplinary approach. HAS is humanities and social sciences, so that sort of, shall we say, softer end of learning, and STEM is science, technology, engineering, and maths. And so in the past, you might say that, you know, you're going to become an engineer and you don't really worry about literature or social sciences, your track is that way. If you're interested in literature and social sciences, you don't worry about maths and all those sort of harder type of subjects. What they're saying now, the research is saying, we need both sides. We need workers to be able to operate technically as well as creatively, to bring the two of those together. And so the key areas that they highlight are digital literacy, design thinking. Is that a concept you talk about here, design thinking? There's quite a movement in Australia about prototyping, creating as you go, not having everything perfect the first time, but it's an evolving process that you're working towards where you want to go, but making changes on the way. Collaboration and teamwork, so you're not going to work in isolation, and that again is multidisciplinary. And again, problem solving, so the cognitive processes involved there. CSIRO has looked specifically at the digitally enabled workforce and what trends are likely to happen. So a bit of future gazing to consider. So here again, they've picked up on those drivers that we mentioned before, so like computing speed, data volumes, and device connectivity are the drivers that are changing the way business is done. And so again, they highlight very strongly that disciplinary and professional boundaries are blurring. And so that has an impact on education. So you have to have a multidisciplinary approach to higher education as well. And they also stress there's a real potential for new roles. And I know probably 5 or 10 years ago, sort of the research have said that 90% of the jobs that school leavers will do in 10 years haven't yet been invented. It's a whole new game that's coming into play. And of course that puts huge implications for academics, and universities are often fairly conservative and don't change as fast, but the change is being demanded from this end, and so it's going to have all of these ramifications for educators. And then the regional study, that indicated that within 2 to 5 years, 90% of the workforce will require digital literacy skills. To be able to use technology purposefully and confidently. And 50% will need skills in programming, software development, and those areas. And therefore, information, digital, and media fluency are absolutely critical. And so that is again this is looking at, as you can see from the image, it's actually thinking ahead of what our current school children need to have in their curriculum to be able to perform at university, to be able to be employed. And so that whole sort of trajectory. So this has implications for the secondary or primary and secondary education, but also for public libraries. So the role that public libraries can play in digital literacy is also really significant. So I'll give you some data for the sake of data. There is a national curriculum in Australia, and they do every 3 years some major testing, rather like the PISA tests and things like that in Europe, to look at literacy, numeracy, and also ICT. Okay, so this is just showing between 2011 and 2014, so that 3-year gap. We're 2017, so we're expecting a new report in the next couple of months on what the outcomes were. Lots and lots of numbers, but if you just look at the Australia-wide figures, you can see that they're actually dropping. The skills of our younger people are dropping rather than growing. And to present that in a little bit more easy way to do so, so it's dropped, so that gives you Australia and then my own state of Queensland. And across the board, the different year 6 and year 10, there's dramatic downward trend in the digital skills, which seems a little strange when we have so much technology and it's so easy to do. So this is a real wake-up call, and that's why everybody's waiting. What's the 2017 figures? We're actually expecting it's going to drop further rather than start rising again. So huge, huge issues in terms of, if you look at all of those business reports and what they are prophesizing is required, how do we then flip the coin to go completely the other way? The main culprit is in itself technology. The digital devices, the super connectivity, everything we can do is actually, and here's a conversation we had in the car this morning, and it's to do with the interviews I was doing in Australia this morning as well. But basically, because it's so easy and so intuitive to use your mobile devices, you don't need to have gradually come through DOS and HTML and all the different changes that I argue most of you, some younger ones here, but some of the older ones, that's the journey we've travelled. You know, we've been moving with the technology. The younger generation is being just dropped in the pond, and they don't have that background to what's happening. And so there's a lot of interest in Australia for young children doing coding. So to be able to build a little robot and make it do things. So there's beginning to be some awareness. But it's going to be a quantum leap, really, to get from those low figures. Okay, so if you look at the year 10, so year 10s are 15, 16 years old. And if within 2 to 3 years it's all a digital workforce, how are you going to go from 50% to 100% in the space of a few years? And so the University of Queensland became, I suppose, aware of all of this happening. There are a number of research studies in the higher education sector in English language, which are really important. There's an international group called NMC, so New Media Corporation. It uses the Delphi model of sort of finding out what are important issues across the world in terms of technology, and then to let the more important ones bubble up to the top and say, okay, this is what's really, really important for universities. Then there's also an edition of the report that is for libraries, academic libraries. What are the important technology issues? And there's also a school sector report as well. So if you're interested in this area, and everybody waits for these reports. They really are very perceptive as to what's going on across the areas. And I've been able to sort of track, they've done the reports for about 10 years, so I've been watching how the word digital literacy just was a one line or one sentence 10 years ago, and now they have whole reports on it. It's really grown and grown and grown in importance. And then across the EU, UNESCO, OECD, they've all had a number of studies into the importance of digital literacy. JISC, do you know about JISC? This is a UK organisation that basically funds the infrastructure for higher education technology. So some of it is the pipes in terms of the actual technology infrastructure, but they also invest a lot in research of what is important in the higher education sector. I encourage you to look at their website. They've got amazing projects that they've been working on. And the important thing is that they involve individual universities. It's not theoretical. The actual pilot studies are done at the grassroots level of different universities. So very practically. And they're they all write up their sort of sections of reports in a very honest appraisal way of where there are problems. It's not just that we've done it really well. It's so to highlight the difficulties. In Australia, there's 3 universities working extensively. Deakin University is a younger university in Australia, and it has taken the strategic goal of being a digital university, so that it's going to attract academics and students who are interested in this space. And so there's a lot of, it's the last 2 years that they've moved in this direction. And so a lot of academics have left. They're like, no, this isn't my place. I need to go to another more, sort of traditional university. Deakin is really leading the way, and it's interesting to watch what they're doing. And I've sort of met with the librarians and how they're trying to change their business to be part of this organisation, and La Trobe and the University of Adelaide. So there is also a funded fellowship. So the Australian government has reduced its support, but still has some support for innovation in teaching and learning in academia. And so there is one fellow, as she's referred to, Jo, who is not surprisingly at Deakin University, but she's looking specifically at all of these issues from school, higher education, into employment, and the implications for universities. So that's an interesting place. She's in the middle of her study at the moment, so we haven't got any findings yet, but we'll discuss with her. So for the University of Queensland, they felt that it was important to address some of these issues early on. So it doesn't just impact teaching and learning, it actually impacts on the research community as well as what's happening there. And so I think probably the middle sentence there, that we need to be able to understand how students and researchers are engaging with information and how they communicate ideas, so that the library understands what to do with the digital resources. So it's got to be sort of what the user is doing as much as what we think we need to supply, so to have effective use. The main concerns are among students and academics that there's a patchwork pattern of information skills. It's not like everybody is able to do this. Some are good, some are bad. There's a real sort of, patchwork, pockets everywhere. And therefore, it was really important to have a university-wide approach for the whole university to address this sooner rather than later, and to involve faculty and students, so to take that cross-community. And so we've developed a strategic framework for information and digital literacy to guide the work that we do, so that there's a document that we can sort of keep coming back to saying, yes, it is important. The university has ratified this document, therefore we have the support of the university to be moving here. And so our vision is really that all members of the community, of the university community, will develop information and digital literacy skills they need to thrive and lead, so in their personal lives, their academic lives, their professional lives, and their civic lives. So again, it's not only about being able to do your assignments. It's about what do you need if e-voting comes in, for example. If there are sort of issues, that's across many different areas of your life, that you're able to function very adequately and lead. That was the important one, that the university, part of its goals is to produce leaders, not just workers. So into the library space from here, we have a very changing understanding of information literacy, and we were talking about that in the last meeting as to what we expect students to be able to do. Again, this is from the English-speaking world. In the United States, they produce the ACRL standards. If you worked in that space, the standards for information literacy, they were adapted and adopted in Australia and New Zealand as the ANZL, we call it, Australia and New Zealand Information Literacy Framework. But you can see from those dates, 2000, 2004, that's actually a long time ago in terms of the context in which we're talking about now. The information literate person, that sort of diagram there shows that you need to identify information, find information, evaluate it, apply it, and acknowledge it, reference it. So very much a linear process. You've got your assignment topic, this is the assumption, you've got your assignment topic, then you just go step by step through this process and the work is done. However, today's context is much more complex. Okay? The information will come from many different sources, and the student isn't going to have an index and abstracting service that they're going to be working from. They're just going to go to Google and sort of find what they can, etc., etc. And the sources of those bits of information are not just going to be in peer-reviewed journals as we would have expected 15 years ago. So they're being sort of attacked from all sides by all of the different resources. Are they open? Are they copyright? Can you participate? Can you create your own content from this? What are the requirements that you need? And that's a diagram that's used in higher education about the learning environment. So it's complex, okay? The poor little brain, the student brain is being bombarded from so many different directions of what is required. So a lot of Australian universities are very aware about the first 1 to 2 weeks of a student's life at university are critical to their graduate outcomes. The quicker they can become part of the, understand the environment, so if they've got a learning management system, and they've got to do their student ID, and they've got to do this, everything's being done electronically, so their digital skills in the first 2 weeks are actually really critical. So the central issues that we're dealing with in the framework are that for life, you need digital skills. That's the baseline. To live, to learn, and to work. It's inevitable you need digital skills. The University of Queensland also has a student strategy to look to the future, and that very strongly emphasises the digital technologies that universities have to contend with. This for the library was very valuable. The documents were almost produced at the same time. So the university, to recognise that digital skills are important, allowed the library, sort of gave voice to the library to say, well, we're the thought leaders in this space. We're going to take the university with us to this new area. As we mentioned before, employers need the graduates to have them skills, and the universities are the ones who should be doing this. So this has really validates the role of the library in being central to the work that they're doing. The other side of it is digital literacy looks different, feels different, tastes different in different disciplines. What a doctor needs in terms of working in e-health is going to be quite different from, say, a scientist working with bacteria or whatever, and what a teacher needs to do. So the education faculty needs to develop in a short space of time teachers who are going to work in the digital literacy space in their schools. So it's different components. Again, the university funds its own teaching innovation, and we put in a grant between 5 faculties and the library to look specifically at these different issues. What does digital literacy look like in the different disciplines? What do employers want? So again, the whole university community working together. So we need to identify whether there are some common denominators that can be embedded in the curriculum of the different university courses, but then also where are the distinctions, where are the differences, to make sure that the different disciplines have their own strengths. So it's not one size fits all, it is tailored to the different areas. For this, we're actually going back to JISC that I mentioned before, the work that they've been doing in terms of digital literacy, because they've already come up, they've done 5 years research, so we don't need to sort of invent a new model. We'll work with one that is proven in the English-speaking world to be working at a number of universities and translate that into the Australian environment. But you can look at that in more detail another time. So our framework, strategic framework, it's available online on the University of Queensland website, you can go there. But we've set it up under a number of guiding principles. Because there isn't one size fits all, it needs to be contextualized in different situations. So the guiding principles are that it's collaboration. The librarians aren't going to do this on their own. They need to work with academics, they need to work with students, they need to work with researchers. It's everybody's business. So the collaboration is the first sort of point of contact there. Alignment. We want it to be aligned with those graduate outcomes, which are discipline specific. So we need to work very closely within the curriculum to ensure that the digital components are included in the natural curriculum. It's not a band-aid sort of add-on, it's actually aligned with the learning goals. We want innovation. And this was actually put in to encourage the librarians to think, oh, I don't have to do things the way I've done it for 5 years or 10 years. I'm allowed to be innovative. So changing the mindset of our library staff was also a really important part of it. And then sustainability, that's very much around saying we're moving into, I suppose, support for learning at the point of need. So rather than running a 1-hour class to 300 students, of which 299 are on their device and not listening to you anyway, changing that to the librarians creating sort of information widgets, is a lovely English word, but you just plug a little video in. So you're looking at, oh, I got to use Harvard referencing. Then there's exactly, in the learning management system, there's a little video that shows or takes you through to the resources. So breaking down the teaching and learning things that librarians have done for a long time and saying there's this bit, this bit, this bit, and it's all plug and play. Moving to videos rather than expecting textual materials, because that's what people go for. If you don't know how to do something these days, you go to YouTube and quickly find a video that's going to tell you. That's the expectation. So that, therefore, is multi-purpose. People can use it at any point. They can be on the train, on the bus, and do their learning at any point in time. And so much easier than having exactly this situation with one librarian talking to a group of people. And it's not important until it's important. You know? So, and the final one is evaluation, that we want to review and evaluate everything that we're doing. And that, again, has not been done by librarians very often very well. So we needed to have it in writing that this is part of your core business, is to review and evaluate. So we have the evidence to say we have made a change to make things happen. So in terms of some of those principles, what is actually happening? So what's the time frame here? The strategic framework was published May 2016. And then I wasn't supposed to go back, but they asked me to come back to actually work through some of these issues. So I went back this time last year, pretty much this week. So we've had about a year to play with the framework, to promote it, to get the whole academic community to know about it, and to understand that they can work with the library in different ways. So the first thing that happened very conveniently was that the information technology services decided that through restructures, they didn't want the e-learning team, which runs Blackboard, our learning management system. They said, no, you've got to move out, you've got to find another home. So of course the library goes, well, in digital literacy, e-learning, the two go together. And so the e-learning team sits outside my door these days, which has just changed the way we can communicate and work together on different things. Because there, I suppose the library traditionally has been working student-facing, and e-learning has been academic-facing. So they're working with the teachers, whereas we're working with the students. So to change that and have everybody talking to each other. Developing a lot of new e-learning resources, online learning resources. That's involved lots of different groups of people talking together. Used to be very siloed. The graduate school, that's, you know, we worry about graduate students, you know, you don't need to come near us. Whereas now, we're able to say, no, we'll do this part. If it's about information, then it's actually, it is our space. So changing the way that people do things. The TNL, Teaching and Learning Grant I just mentioned, we'll know about that, whether we've been successful, hopefully we are. And then sharing practice and ideas across the university. Suddenly the library is on a lot of people's radar in spaces it wasn't before, which is good. We have liaison librarians, so subject-specific librarians who work in the schools and faculties. And so they've now got their document to go to their academics and say, if you're going to redesign your curriculum, let us be part of that journey so that we know that we're heading in the right direction. One innovation, which is quite an exciting one, I think, we have digital librarians in residence. So this is more on the research side, and we started off in the humanities and social sciences to look at the role of the librarian as researchers are becoming more and more digital. So what does their data, their research data look like? What tools are they using to analyze their data? What training do they need? Because not all researchers are experts. in the areas that they're working in terms of the digital technologies. And so we've been working specifically, so we have 13-week residencies. So a librarian will go and just work directly in the faculty with researchers in those areas. And so we're now on the second round of that. We're reviewing and evaluating as we go through. We also, in Teaching and Learning Week, have run poster fairs where librarians make a poster about how the digital literacy framework, how they're using it in there. So to basically showcase and unpack what they're doing so it becomes more visible. And then certainly the sustainability. The university has recognised the work that we're doing. The next round of recruitment we're doing at the moment is for media designers. Okay, so library, we had a little bit of this conversation earlier that to work in a library you don't, in Australia, necessarily have to be a librarian. And what we find our librarians are lacking in is creativity. And I need a person who can create content that's usable, attractive, engaging immediately. And so we're sort of recruiting for a media designer to have as an ongoing, continuing position. But then there was some strategic funding, and the university has given me enough money for 2 media designers for 12 months to change everything the librarians are doing within 12 months. So it is seen to be really highly strategic, which is great. But that means lots of new training activities for everybody, for students and academics, and then the evaluation work that we're doing. So basically, we're saying digital scholarship is central to university life today, not just scholarship, but digital scholarship. And so it comes back to understanding what teachers, students, and researchers are doing in the digital space so that we can support them in the best way that we can. And so the library also has what we term the Centre for Digital Scholarship. And this is a new initiative in the last 2 years as well. So it's actually a floor of the library which has become the Centre for Digital Scholarship. It's just an open area, but it's focusing on the hardware and software tools. So a lot of 3D printing, photogrammetry, GIS systems, geographic information system, web scraping, textual analysis, all of those sort of areas of activity. Because there's pockets of things happening all across the university, you're not going to stop it happening, but it becomes a focus saying if you want information about this, you come to the library and there'll be people there. So again, here we employ postgraduate students who are specialists, if you like, in those areas who can run training courses for other academics and things. It's not the librarians do. The librarians are coming up to speed and are part of the conversation, but they're not necessarily needing all of them to have the same level of skills. There's too much for them to do. But then the liaison librarians themselves are that sort of conduit between everybody. So that's just a quick screenshot. So the Centre for Digital Scholarship provides training and information about textual analysis, data visualization, geographical systems, media creation, and 3D modeling software. So it's a sort of whole new area. Of course, librarians are having to upskill all the time within this. So that's really, I suppose, brings together what we've been trying to do at one university, trying to address a national issue from that side. Very much that the library is central, but it's library working with the whole university, that a university-wide approach will be really important along those lines. So the strategic framework, really the document itself, is a conversation starter. Okay, it's helping people have a common language and to recognise common directions they want to go and a shared philosophy. But it helps the library specifically explain the roles that it can play. It certainly allows it to align itself with the agenda of technology across the university and to sort of explain the value of the investment that's going into all of those areas. But really importantly, I think it encourages the library staff to realise that they have a role to play. And when I sort of ran workshops, when we finished doing the framework and we ran workshops to help the librarians understand it, there was that sort of, oh, we've tried this stuff before and nobody listened to us and everything. We said, now we've got a document that's ratified by the university, you're allowed to talk about this and you're encouraged to talk about this. And that's, I think, been the major difference. And so most librarians have got it on their desk somewhere or on the pinboard or something. But I'd say recently the conversations I've had with academics, as part of my role is to be talking with the academics across the university. Nobody hasn't heard of the strategic framework. It's not new to them. And so that's a real plus. In the space of really probably 6 to 8 months, we have changed the awareness without any videos or anything. But, so that's really important. What we are trying to do, UQ Library, is really trying to build a successful future and to be part of that future along the way. And there's lots of references at the end for your good librarian. So all of the documents have been referenced are there so that you can head back through and things like that. So that's my little snapshot of information and digital literacy of University of Queensland in Australia. Good. Are there any questions or comments? Does this make sense to you, or is it completely new and different, or is it a trend that's beginning to emerge in Croatia that you need to get your heads around as well? We have a lot of exchange students who come to the University of Queensland, so if they're sort of part of this, they're going to come back to your university and say, hello, this is sort of our expectation for our education as well.
Perhaps as a digital learner, I don't know, some e-learning courses will be good for our students. And
yes. So most of the education here is face-to-face.
Yeah. I want to talk about our problems that we had barely cope with
if it's been recorded.
Barely cope with the printed materials. So this digital new world is very futuristic, if I may say, for us. But I think it is inevitable.
Yeah.
The future will come, and to bear with digital users, digital informations, and it will be something that we will do in the future eventually.
Yeah, it runs in our family. My elder daughter is a teacher, so year 1 teacher. She's sort of looking after her own children and various things at the moment, but one day a week she's back at her school doing digital literacy for 4-year-olds. So that's and she's teaching them all the math skills and PowerPoint and Word and this and that all. So yeah, there's that. Yeah.
And this new generation will come to the library. So
yeah, that's right, and that's the thing. I mean, the libraries in Australia certainly have been getting rid of print quite a bit. So again, we were discussing earlier, sort of recreational reading, fiction, etc. Probably people are picking up books far more again, not just relying on Kindle when you travel, but sort of at home, and that's younger people as well are wanting to read print. But for academic texts, which you're not going to spend hours and hours, reading cover to cover. You're looking for certain pieces of information, and that's very much is electronic. So the libraries are full. I mean, every university library in Australia has a shortage of space, but it's the people. It's the students themselves coming, even though they've all got laptops and they've got this, they still want desk space and the ability to work, intensely with, very often, again, print materials and things like that, they're printed out. So libraries are central, and public libraries have become exactly in the same way the centre of the community. So they're not disappearing in any sense. The municipalities in Australia are very aware of the integral value of a strong community, and that the library is central to that. We don't have laws that, we were saying earlier, we don't have laws that say every municipality has to have a library. It's very much driven by bottom up rather than top down, and so there are changes. Yeah.
It's happy to hear. The future will not be just the digital event.
I just think the volume of information is what's changed things. So if you go back 10 years and everything was going online, we said, oh, everything's going to be online, we don't need librarians. But of course that doesn't take into account managing the huge amount of information and providing filtering. Another task or activity I'm involved in at the moment is with government libraries in Canberra, in our capital city, and I've been interviewing senior government people about their understanding of the library and how they're used, etc. And all of them have said very loudly that it's a new world. You know, it was, we didn't think we needed the library, suddenly now we need the skills. It's not the place, it's the skills that we need to manage in-house documentation that the government produces, as much as research coming from outside. And so, but dare I say, my problem in that project is the librarians themselves, the unwillingness to take these new opportunities and challenges. They just don't want to do it. And so the government libraries are going downhill. The users want them, but the staff are not responding to that. And nobody's being a leader in that space. And that's the sad thing. That, you know. And I did a similar study with health librarians a few years ago, and the leaders of sort of major hospital and health services had incredible ideas about what their librarians could and should be doing. But the librarians themselves weren't doing it. Sorry.
Is there any question or comments? Please be free to speak up.
Staff exchanges to Australia, come on.
Okay, Gillian, thank you.
No, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I hope you found it interesting.
Yeah,
Some
I find
relevance.
interesting. Your strategic documents, we always look up for the new ideas, the new strategic movements, so we will, and still is, using your strategic documents highly. So.
Yeah, and they're Creative Commons, so you can take them and adapt them and do what you want with them as well, so, which we know is happening around the world. So.